Hello, this is Robert Holzhauser. And for my graduate project, I created a little app called Topica, which is short for topical analysis. And where that came from is back in the 80s, I took a personal development class called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or NLP. And the teacher of the class, Richard Bandler, said that he envisioned at some point in the future that there would be the possibility of having like a little booth or some way that people, remember this was in the 80s, would interact with the computer. They'd walk in to the booth, sit down, interact with the computer for a while and come out, and it would be better than a therapy session. So that kind of inspired me, and I've always had that in the back of my mind. So I decided to implement that for my project. And so with this app, I'm going to demonstrate some different Angular topics. I'm going to demonstrate structural directives, input decorators, routing, and dependency injection of a data service. So this is what the app looks like. So all of the different links are done through the routing engine. And so we have a list of different programs, different issues. CSS for the footer wasn't great, but nonetheless, this form also is not hooked up, but it's not what I'm demonstrating. Some different sessions here, and then whether we're logged in or logged out, which is going to be where I demonstrate the structural directives. The footers is pretty cool because that's also served up through a data service. All right, so let's take a look at the code here. So let's first off look at the routing, which is here in our routing module. So this is where I'm importing all of the templates. Of course, this is importing the routing functionality. Everything else is importing here, is importing the templates and components. Then we go down and get the actual paths to include in the URL. Towards the bottom here, I also have a redirect to, if there's no other path given, it will default to go to the About page, which looks like that. And just to demonstrate that that's working, if I take that off, just provide that, it comes back with About. And then last but not least, we have our 404, which routes to the page not found component. Here we go. So very simple page not found. And let's demonstrate that that routing is working. Just add some Z's here, something kind of X's, something kind of nonsensical. And that's our template for the 404 page. All right, so going on, let's look at the data services. So I have a bunch of data services here set up. Let's start with our program service. So with our program service, this is injectable. We have an array of programs, some JSON, and some CRUD operations, which are a list of programs, getting a program by ID, adding a user to the array, modifying an element, and deleting or removing one. So throughout all of my services, I've set up the same CRUD operations, just specific to that particular kind. So we've got a user service, a session service, resolution service. Let's look though real quick at the footer service. With our footer service, so we've got privacy policy and terms of use. In the array here, I'm defining a router link and router text, which is going to be the name that's displayed here on the footer privacy policy terms of use. So then when we get routed to those, what happens is we have a footer component that uses the star in G4 to iterate through our array of footers, pulling out footer objects and using the input decorator with the footer here to invoke our individual template. Or in this case, that template is a link. So we have a router link, which is picking up the router link from the object, and also the router text, which is picking that up from the footer object. Now the footer object is getting those through an input decorator here. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. Next up, let's just look at a couple other of these. So we have our program list, which is using dependency injection, like these all are. So to do dependency injection, we're importing a program service, and we're making that available as a provider. We have an empty programs array what really makes this dependency injection is we have the program service provided here, and then we're instantiating it, we're injecting it with a slight different name here. And so we're picking up program service, pulls in our list of programs, makes it available here. Then each one of those is using the star in G4 structural directive to loop through, pull out a program, and bring that in to our component template. Oops, this is the program list with the input decorator. Really starting to get a feel for how this all works together. So real quick, let's also look at the login and logout mechanism. So this is not fully implemented for user authorization or authentication. This is just kind of moving in that direction to sort of make the navbar look like that for a start. So in app component, where are we here? App component. There we go. We have this property user logged in. Right now it's set for true. When it's set for true, it looks like I'm logged in. So if I happen to change that, make that false, then that's going to trigger some star ng if structural directives, and it's going to look like I'm not logged in. And the way that that's working is we have a user service that has an array of users, as well as our CRUD operations for users. So then in my the real thing here is that in this case, have the dependency injection like we talked about. So it's a little different because instead of a list of users, I'm pulling in a specific user, which in reality would be passed in after authentication, etc. So what happens with this is in our template, I'm using the app user template, app user component template. That gets shown only if I'm logged in. And the reverse of that, it's a little form with the buttons that is only shown if I'm not logged in with the NGF. So I thought that was pretty cool. Oh, the one other piece that I forgot to mention for the browsers that's absolutely essential to make it work is this is where those go. And then this is where the app footer, which includes all pieces of the footer. Let's look at that real quick one more time. That's the footer item. The overall footer, though, is here, which includes the footer, each specific footer, as well as the copyright info. more glimpse at that. These are our two footer items and then the copyright info. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to post the code out on GitHub so you can take a closer look. And I'm also going to give a go to see if I can get it deployed real quick up to DigitalOcean. And you can play with it there if you want. Thank you very much. It's been a great class, and I hope you, as we're kind of winding down, I know we still got a couple weeks left, and hope you enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you're watching this. Have to figure out how to work Zoom.